Ryan and I just played Gears of Corruption. This is the first expansion to Expeditions or Scythe Expeditions, however you want to call it. This has more going on than I suspected after reading through the rules. I was like, okay, that's some interesting things. But we're here to tell you about what some of those differences are after having just played it. Who we think this game is for, who it's not for. There are probably some obvious points to be made there. But let's get right to it. We just played this on a live stream.
Yeah, you can watch it actually. It's posted. You can see how that game went, and we'll probably reference some of the moments that happened as we kind of talk about, what we thought about the game.
Yeah, did Ryan win? Did I win? Not going to ruin it for you. You'll have to check it out. You can guess beforehand. Yeah. But we want to tell you a little bit more in this video about some of the differences, some of the things that this has added. The big thing is corruption. It's leaning into the corruption. Yeah. Obviously, there's corruption in the base game. When you flip tiles, you put the corruption out. Now this isn't a specific mech. You pull whatever mech you're not using out of the box.
You get to choose.
You get to choose, but at a certain point, there's a corrupted mech that comes out. As soon as one player gets one glory, you put the corrupted mech out on an unoccupied open space, and then there's this handful of cards that sort of not only dictate how much corruption is on the mech, but also serve as you add to that pile of cards, how that mech is going to move around and potentially mess with you.
Yeah, that's an interesting new addition, and there's a lot more going on with that than I think either one of us really realized when we started the game.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it is like a moving stack of corruption. The corruption piles can get pretty big on a space. You could get, now with the addition of these new level 2 corruptions, they can get a little high. You can get maybe up to like 4 corruption on a stack. And if you remember from playing Expeditions, you're kind of wanting to go there. And if you have enough strength, you could knock out all 4 in one go. But the most you're probably ever going to get is 4. However, we noticed, or something that I didn't think about until after the game, was the corrupted mech gets a new card on each of its turns. So if players are not managing that corruption, you end up with this giant stack of cards. And something that happened in our game was I was able to go over there and knock out 5 of those cards in one blow. And I think if players were more cognizant of that, and you're kind of keeping an eye on that stack as it grows and saying, well, it's getting really juicy. I need to knock a couple cards off there so that one player can't just come and take 5 or 6 cards in one turn. Somebody's going to go over there, especially as these cards come out. Some of them require more symbols and some of them require less symbols. So that's the strength, just like on a corruption, that's what you have to spend to defeat it. So if you get into a situation where there's a couple low-level ones, everybody's going to notice that and probably be gunning for the mech. So it does add like a completely different path to getting those corruption tokens.
Yeah, for sure. They are treated as corruption tokens. Now, with that said, there are cards that refer to corruption tokens, and then cards that refer to corruption. When it refers to corruption, they're referring to both of those things. But those cards, as well as the tokens from the base game, both qualify for this achievement right here, for the glory. So Ryan got 5 in one go there, so he was like nearly there in terms of getting that. And like he said, he has his in his stack, but there are some here with just like one icon that you had to spend.
Yeah,
maybe 2.
I had some with like one icon, right? 1 or 2 icons. And I think recognizing that and counting up how much you have to spend, and in the base game, it's all about maybe if you can get that 20 corruption token. This is an achievement all on its own. If you can get it, you have to max out both tracks to 10 if you even want a shot at this, and then you have to be the one to get there and take it. So this gives you something else to do, especially if somebody's already taken that token and you find yourself with a ton of power and guile. Other than like hunting for a stack that's tall, you could chase down this thing and start knocking it off. It's even possible if you knock out all of the cards to defeat the mech and remove it from the game.
Yeah, it's really cool because I think strategically also, before when you had 10 and 10 of both, everyone at the table knew what you were up to.
Yeah, you're going for the 20.
Now you don't necessarily know what that player's up to because they could just as easily come over here. And in many respects, I mean, if they're not hurting to just get another glory token out there, this is just as viable way to get that, especially if you don't have 7 corruption already.
You could get 7 just from that stack.
Exactly. You could go all the way down through it. Now, the corruption and the corrupted mech are not the only thing, but this whole thing leans into corruption. One of the things it does, though, is it adds another player, so you can play up to 6 players now. And no matter what player count you're playing at, they have this sort of kickstart sort of mechanism, they have this card here that goes with the mech mats. There are 2 new mech mats. We played with those. I played with the Scarecrow. You had the Mole.
I was the Mole, yep.
Both of these had powers that benefited off of the use of some of those map tokens. You could spend the map tokens. Mine was cool. I could spend a map token after a refresh action to take one of the 3 actions, basically, before my next turn, which was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But you get one of these cards, it tells you randomly, here's the mech you're going to be using, but it also has a bunch of resources across the top. Mine had 5 power and 1 guile, not to mention this wild worker.
Yeah, this hero worker.
Hero worker is a wild worker. It counts as any color. You get it from the very beginning of the game. You get some resources from the beginning of the game. So if you've ever played Expeditions, you understand at the beginning, everyone's just kind of going here, getting a worker, here, getting a worker.
You kind of have to.
And then you have to move up here before you even get any of the resources.
And in a 4-player game, 2 people park on those spots and they block them, and you're trying to find other ways.
At least for the first 2 turns. They usually are move and gather, and then gather and...
Or gather and play.
Gather and play, yeah. So they can get clogged up. But now, you could literally on your first turn, which I did in our game, move 1, 2, 3, reveal that, and already
jump right into it.
Vanquish some of the corruption.
Well, yeah, because you're starting with the worker that you need for multiple cards, and you're starting. Yeah, having the guile and power to start the game with is a huge help to get things rolling. I mean, we were rolling into the game immediately after just a couple turns. It felt like we were already in the middle of what a game of Expeditions would be. Normally.
It makes for a quicker game, and then like they say in the rule book, at 6 players, it helps keep that game down to a manageable time.
Yeah, and I know this is a silly little thing, but for me, production is huge. And so the new mechs come with new mats, and they actually reprinted all the mats for all the old mechs as well, so you can have a whole set. They're now dual layered, and there's separate tracks for power and guile, which is really nice. So those things combined really help with the production value. Not that this game needed help. I mean, the production value was already insane. Especially if you have the metal edition, because those miniatures are phenomenal.
They are.
But it just helps. I like the new player boards. I like the new powers. I didn't mention mine. The other new one is the Mole. It lets you spend map tokens to ignore corruption when you're taking actions. So you can take an action. When you gather, you can take the action that's underneath the corruption without clearing the corruption.
That's pretty huge, too. In our game, one of the boast actions was all the way at the bottom of a 4 stack of corruption. Ryan didn't have to move any of that corruption if he didn't want to. And in fact, it would have benefited him, especially in a 4-player game. Yeah. Everyone else would not be able to use that, but
that was
you
great
would.
For me. And also, I didn't take a lot of corruption off the board because I was just ignoring it. So I was able to kind of save up my power and guile to fight the corrupted mech instead. So I really didn't have to spend turn after turn clearing Vanquish. In fact, I only used my companion's Vanquish action once, which we should mention too. There are new companions and new characters that come in this as well.
Yeah, I can't remember how many. I want to say there's at least 3 sets, but maybe 4 sets of each of those. All of them doing slightly different things, but similar along the lines of what you might expect from the original ones. There is one, though, set, the one that I use, that kind of leans into the corruption. Neither of the cards has a vanquish action.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't naturally vanquish. You have to find a card to do that. However, the leader card lets you just simply, without paying any resources, take the top corruption off of a location, or the top card off of the corrupted mech if you're within range. The last couple things it has before we tell you who it's for and who it's not for, there's a few new cards that they added to the deck, one of which is a replacement, but a few others that kind of lean into the corruption aspect. And then this is one of my favorite parts, actually, is it's simple, but the map tokens now that you can use have bonuses on the underside of them. So when you put them out and discover a map tile, you flip over the map tile, you first flip this over and get the bonus immediately. One of the things I like about the game, and this kind of dovetails right into who it's for and who it's not for, if you like the exploration of Expeditions, particularly compared to something like Scythe, I think Expeditions, one of the biggest things for me is that feeling of discovery. You put all these map tiles, or most of them, face down, and you're kind of like having to discover them, particularly with the quests. This just adds one more layer of that. You go out there and you flip over the map token, get a thing. Not to mention the new mechs kind of benefit also from the map tokens.
Yeah, getting map tokens was always a good thing. You could spend them. There was a achievement for having having 5 map tokens. So there was always reasons to get them and to race to get them. But there were still ways to get them outside of exploration, and you can still do that. But you get just regular old map tokens. So these special map tokens with the abilities have to come from exploration. So now I feel like there's even more of a race to get these because you're going to want those powers. Plus, with the boosted values that we start the game with, you can get up to those explorations a little faster.
Yeah.
So people are beelining out to explore and get those tokens rather than puddling around in the early spaces like you mentioned. So not only does it make the game faster to get started, I think it makes it more dynamic too, as far as what you're opening your game with.
It's more rewarding right from the get-go.
that's a
You're
good way
able
to
to
put it.
take your first turn and not just prepare. Like, you've done the preparing in just basically playing this card and collecting stuff. To be able to go out and vanquish corruption straight away, it helps, I think, make players understand here are the things that can happen in the game.
Yeah. And
As opposed to like, okay, because if you taught someone new expeditions and they're new to these sorts of games, they may be collecting workers, collecting some of the guile and power and going, what am I doing with this again? And this one, someone on the first turn can go do, oh, I see the flow. I see what we're spending that stuff on.
And I think if I mean, this probably goes without saying, if you're not a fan of expeditions, this is not going to turn you into one.
No.
But if you were a person that liked expeditions but thought it had some flaws, I think one of the big ones that we experienced at our table, I wouldn't even call it a flaw, is that if you have a game where 4 players are going heavy on corruption, these map spaces can get emptied pretty quick, and then you spend a lot of the game wandering around going, well, I'm trying to find some corruption to defeat. I think having a new source of corruption in the form of that corrupted mech, yes, it can still be defeated, but it has a big stack of cards. There's probably like 15 cards, so it's almost like adding, are you going to count them?
7 there.
So it's like 12 new cards.
12 new cards.
It's like adding 12 new corruption tokens to the board.
And new corruption in the 2s.
And there's 2s, so
the 2s slow it down too, so it effectively, at least probability-wise, means that there's more corruption tiles coming out as well.
I mean, it's still going to be a race. You're just going to be less likely to completely run out. But that being said, I mean, there's a lot of different avenues to victory in the game. This doesn't necessarily add any new ones, but it does allow you to get to that 7 a lot faster. It also maybe allows you to get the 20 a little easier because not all 4 players are going to be racing for that 20 marker. Some of them are going to be spending their corruption fighting, or spending their vanquish actions fighting the corrupted mech instead. So it does bring that fresh balance, I think, if you were feeling a little frustrated by running out of things to do. I don't feel like you're going to run out as easily in this one.
No, I think if you are a fan, conversely, of expeditions, this, in my opinion, is a no-brainer. Like Ryan said earlier, we'll probably never play without this. I can't imagine why I would want to do that. I mean, every aspect of it is just cooler. And even at 2 players, I think I still will play with this.
Oh, for sure.
Even though I think it's meant more for the higher player counts, it's just fun to have things going. And it really keeps the game tight. It keeps it down pretty short.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we played a 2-player game in
less than an hour and a half.
Yeah, less than an hour and a half. Probably closer to an hour 15.
Yeah,
honestly. And again, I can't stress enough like how much more it felt like I was diving right into the action, which is good. Maybe not for the beginner scythe player because you're kind of exploring the game. Mm-hmm. But for somebody that knows what they want to do, I can start getting into what I really like, which is the card combos, and that cycle of playing and refreshing. You get into that so much quicker. I mean, I had my 8 cards in like just a couple turns because I was able to actually go out and start gaining cards instead of spending time gaining workers. In fact, I really just relied on my 1 hero worker for like maybe the first half of the game.
Well, you were refreshing pretty quickly over and over.
Or finding ways to rescue my hero miniature. That's a great thing too because this hero miniature, like it's a wild, so when it's out there, you can rescue it, come back, play another card, and just put that wild right back out, which is really good.
The flip side of all that preparation that you don't have to do is I went out and started doing things and maybe could have stood to pick up a couple more workers.
Gotta at least
and
help
then
a little bit,
later in the game, at least in normal expeditions, you don't find yourself going back and getting more workers too often unless you get a card that requires one. So I found it hard to come back into this area to get a worker, and spend a whole turn doing that.
Yeah, now as far as who it's not for, this is a little harder because at this point, if you're watching this video, you've probably at least tried scythe expeditions. I don't know if this is going to take the game for somebody that did not like it or did not enjoy the core gameplay. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really introduce anything new to like that core gameplay loop that might bring you over, but it does make it more dynamic. And maybe just that boosted start is enough to suck your interest back into, or at least to give it another try, because it does a lot like with Prelude and Terraforming Mars. It makes a huge difference being able to jump right into the action. And I don't know, maybe that's the thing that was off-putting to you, was like you felt like it started too slow. In that case, you definitely want to give it another try.
100% for sure. That might be enough to turn you.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer anything you ask. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.